The president has made the Caravan making its way from Central America through Mexico a cornerstone of the upcoming midterm elections. And there's a lot of controversy about it. Joining us this morning is Hadar Aviram, UC professor, immigration law at UC Hastings. Question, is this just a phenomenon in America, this sort of mass refugees moving over?
Not at all. We see refugees in Europe as well coming in from the Middle East and in various other countries around the world.
Now, we hear the term asylum seekers. That is, we hear that in Europe, we hear that here. What is an asylum seeker legally? What are we talking about here?
Essentially, somebody who seeks asylum is trying to flee the country where they're being persecuted for some reason. There are definitions in the UN Convention of who is an appropriate asylum seeker and who can get asylum in a new country.
Now, one of the issues that the president is bringing up is that definition of asylum seekers. He is saying that the people coming in from Guatemala, Honduras, through Mexico, first of all, they are seeking an economic betterment of life, not necessarily persecution for religious or political reasons. What are we dealing with here?
So it's a common perception that people try to exploit the asylum status to try and get a better economic future for themselves and for their families. That does not really bear with what we empirically know about these people. What we know is that, first of all, seeking asylum in itself is a very, very difficult status. And people go through untold hardships, both physically getting to another place and legally to try to meet the status, which is actually very, very difficult to try and get in. For the most part, people are rejected. And specifically in the U.S., we tend to reject huge percentages of people specifically from Central America.
And because they do not fall under what we consider the criteria, is that it?
The definition of the UN is actually fairly narrow of what counts as an asylum seeker. For example, some categories like being an LGBT member or being a woman are not listed in the convention.
Okay, so if the Caravan makes its way to the United States border, the second contention is that they are somehow gaming the system. In other words, they arrive here, they ask for asylum, they are allowed to be given a bus ticket to someone if they know somebody in the United States, pending a court date, and then they vanish into the United States. Is that real?
Not really. They're actually acting specifically legally. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do under asylum law, which is to arrive to a legal port of entry. We actually don't even know if they're going to make it yet. They're still very, very far from the U.S. border. If they do make it, they will arrive at a legal port of entry asking for asylum, which is exactly what the law allows them to do.
But are they taking it? Do they then go into the United States and not show up for their court appearances? That's what the president is saying. I mean, is he telling the truth?
This is not exactly what the facts are bearing. It's also true that since 2018, our immigration policy has changed so that we're actually not summoning people to court in the order that they came in. So the newer people to arrive are actually the people that show up in court the earliest.
Okay, other countries, how do they handle it? Would they handle this differently than us?
So the standards are very similar theoretically because everybody's a signatory to the same convention, but the way asylum law actually operates in different countries depends a lot on the culture of the country and how welcome it is to refugees. There have been countries who have been very moved by the plight of refugees and are willing to take on more refugees. And what we're seeing is that the thought that this is, burdening a country or really weighing it and the existing citizens are really opposing it is not really true.
Then why are Europeans changing their tone on this?
They're not really. We've interviewed, colleagues of mine have interviewed German citizens, and they found that the opinions about immigration are the same.
Okay, but their elections show a little bit different.
The opinions in the public are the same. It's never been a very welcoming country for refugees.
Okay, it's interesting. Well, we were going to take up another issue in a little while called the anchor babies or something like that the president is throwing out. Well, can you stick around for a couple minutes? All right.
Country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits.
That has become a cornerstone of the president's midterm election pitch. And joining us this morning is Hadar Aviram, UC professor of law and who majors in immigration issues. Okay, is the president correct? Are we the only country that allows this?
No, the simple answer is no. The president is incorrect. There are about 30 countries in the world that do the same thing.
Okay, they basically say that if you are born, physically born on the country, that you are a citizen for life.
Exactly. Your birth gives you citizenship rights.
Now, one of the questions that is being raised by the president is this idea of anchor babies, or people coming in specifically to have a baby and then possibly leave. We've done stories about it here on the television station about people flying in from Asia and staying in a house until they have the baby. We had earlier reports of women crossing the borders, having babies and going back. Do other countries allow that as well?
Other countries do not, some countries, 30 countries do not have restrictions on this, and countries that do have restrictions on citizenship for newborns will sometimes have a path to offer people citizenship later on in life. For example, in Australia, if you're born in Australia, you're not perhaps automatically a citizen, but at the age of 10, you are granted citizenship.
Now, one of the things that concerns people is that the president might be using his definition of this, or trying to use the definition of this, for people who are here illegally having children here, so that the children of people here illegally. Now, constitutionally, most people say that that's wrong, that he's interpreting it incorrectly. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that the way we're framing citizenship is completely wrong. And of course, the argument that somebody would have a baby here and then would not have to worry about their own status or being separated from their family has been proven completely wrong by this administration.
Okay, but if he throws this out there via an executive order, says no more of this, people would say, well, that's not constitutional. But it would take it into the courts. What is the history of the courts on this?
It is very...
The 14th Amendment.
Well, the 14th Amendment is a very sensitive issue because it's the amendment through which the states get rights. So a lot of the constitutional rights that we have hang on the 14th Amendment, and that means that this would, of course, make headlines. It's not surprising that this is not all rising right as the midterms are coming around. So more of a provocation than a realistic chance that he could actually modify the Constitution through an executive order.
But the Constitution has been modified over the periods of time, and people have different opinions on it. If he puts it into the court system, is it guaranteed that it's going to be ruled unconstitutional, or would there be a chance of a court fight and a new standard set?
It's pretty much guaranteed. You can't amend the Constitution outside of the legislature. An executive order from the president cannot modify the Constitution on its own without an act of Congress.
If the president is talking about doing this and the courts say no, where does that leave things?
Exactly the same way that they are, with the citizenship laws the way that they are.
And with the citizenship laws the way that they are, when he talks about anchor babies, do the parents then have rights to come into the country?
Not necessarily. And we've seen separations at the border. We've seen the way that immigration services can pretty easily break up families when the time comes. Many immigrants that are here and are undocumented are actually concerned specifically about that if they get deported, their children stay alone in the United States.
Then why would somebody, let's say from China, fly over, have the final months of their pregnancy here and deliver a baby in the United States?
I think some of this might have to do with the quality of medical services here. Some of this might have to do with the misperceptions that people will have rights, so for different reasons.
So some of these women are being hustled?
I think that some people just might be mistaken about the rights that their children might have if they come in here.
Okay, well, that is one of the issues here that we're going to be, I'm sure, between politics and the courts, we're going to be immersed in, again, anchor babies. It's probably going to be now part of the new lexicon in America. Thank you for joining us this morning.